I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it for a second. If your child, your own child, didn't fit the mold that we as a society have decided is normal, would you still love them unconditionally? I hope your answer is yes. But the story I want to talk about today shows us that it's not a given, not even close. You may have already heard about this. Jesse and Ashley Ridgway, an American influencer couple with a massive following, publicly announced that they ended their pregnancy halfway through. The reason? A prenatal finding that indicated Down syndrome. The explanation was that they weren't ready for that kind of responsibility, that they didn't feel equipped to handle what that life would require of them. I read that multiple times. I sat with it. Because I didn't want to react, I wanted to actually think about what this means. And I'm not here today to tear this couple apart. That's not what this is about. What I want to talk about is what this story reveals about us as a society, about our values, about our fear, about the things we'd rather not look at too closely. Let's actually talk about Down syndrome for a minute. People with Down syndrome today live on average into their 60s. Many of them work. Many of them are in relationships. Many of them get married. There are people with Down syndrome who write books, who perform on stage, who dedicate their lives to helping others. This isn't some idealized pictures. This is real life. And yet, as a society, we seem to be asking ourselves, is that life worth living? And I have to ask, who gave us the right to make that call? Why are we taking away a soul's right to exist simply because they don't fit the standard we set for ourselves? And here's the thing I really want to push on, because this conversation is so often framed as being entirely about body autonomy, my body, my choice. And yes, that matters, because there's another person in this equation. There's also the right of that child. When you decide to have a baby, part of that decision has to include the awareness that your child might not come out the way you imagined. That's not a worst case scenario, that's just life. We walk around acting like we're in control, like we can custom order a child, healthy, neurotypical, easy. But it has never worked that way. How many babies are born perfectly healthy and then experience oxygen deprivation during delivery? How many parents don't find out until their child is 3, 4, or 5 years old that they're on the autism spectrum? How many families are blindsided by illness, by accidents, by things no one could have predicted or prevented? There is no guarantee that your child will grow up to be a healthy adult. There never has been. And yet we keep acting like there is. And when reality doesn't match the plan, when it doesn't fit the picture we had in our heads, we treat it like a problem to be solved, like something to be removed. What does that say about us? Now here's the part that really stopped me in my tracks. Jesse and Ashley have publicly and with a lot of love spent enormous amounts of money keeping their dog alive. Their dog has a disability. He requires intensive care and expensive medical treatments. And they've done all of it with dedication, with heart, with genuine love. That's beautiful. I mean that. But then I think the same couple said they weren't prepared to take on the responsibility of raising a child with Down syndrome. And I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying this to attack them personally. I'm saying it because I see this pattern everywhere. I keep encountering people who are loudly, passionately pro-choice, my body, my choice, and those same people are the first to judge, to shame, to outrage when it comes to mistreatment of animals. People who would move mountains for their pets, people who march for animal rights, and yet those same people will say without blinking that a child with a disability is simply too much to take on. I think it's sometimes easier for us to love animals than it is to love people who are different, because animals don't challenge us. They don't hold a mirror up to our limitations. They don't ask anything uncomfortable of us. And that's worth looking at, not as an attack, as an honest self-reflection. And now I'm going to go somewhere that might feel unfamiliar to some of you. But everything I'm about to share comes from my actual day-to-day work in my practice. This isn't theory for me. When does a human being start to feel? When does the soul incarnate? When does a person begin storing experiences, processing emotions? A lot of people believe at birth. Some say at a certain point in the pregnancy, and others say an embryo is just a cluster of cells and the right to life only begins once the baby is born. In my experience, that's simply not true. I work with people. I help them untangle their past, release trauma, heal wounds they've been carrying for years. People come to me with chronic pain, depression, panic attacks, anxiety, addiction, often with no clear explanation for where it all started. And it's not uncommon when we go deep enough to find that the root of the problem happened before they were even born. Something I've noticed again and again is this. With women who are trying to conceive, you can often sense a soul already orbiting around the mother, present, waiting, even before the child is conceived. The soul chooses its parents. It doesn't happen by accident. And I've worked with people who carry trauma that traces all the way back to the moment of their conception, particularly in cases where that moment wasn't loving, where it wasn't chosen. When a mother becomes pregnant unintentionally, she goes through an emotional storm inside. The question of whether to keep the baby, the uncertainty, the fear, the shame, maybe the loneliness. All of that transfers. The baby in her womb experiences all of it. And those adults who come to me years later sometimes carry a deep, unexplainable distrust of life, a need to control everything, fears that seem to come from nowhere, an underlying feeling that the world isn't safe, that they're not truly welcome in it. They don't know why, but underneath it all, there's still that question: am I wanted here? Then there's something called vanishing twin syndrome. People who spend their whole lives carrying a grief they can't name, an emptiness, guilt that has no obvious source, depression that just won't lift, no matter what they try. And when we go back, when we really look, it often comes out that there were originally a twin, a sibling who dissolved during the pregnancy. When we heal that original wound, and we can, something shifts, something releases. They're suddenly free of something they could never put into words. And sometimes what happens is this. One soul reaches out to another, like holding someone's hand on a diving board when they're too scared to jump. One soul helps the other land, helps them arrive safely into life. But that first soul never intended to stay. It was only ever there to help the other one get in. And so once the child has settled into the womb, that soul leaves again. I'm not saying any of this to assign blame. Not to parents, not to anyone. That is not the point. The point is that we need to understand life begins at conception. The soul is present. The child is experiencing. It has joy and it has fear. It feels the full range of emotions. That doesn't suddenly switch on at birth. And because of that, we owe it to ourselves and to the lives we bring into this world to live more consciously with our own bodies, what we eat, what we consume, how we move through our days, more consciously with other people too, trying to show up with kindness, with presence. And when we're pregnant, knowing that this child chose us, that it feels what we feel, that it is already a complete being with its own character and its own story, even while it's still inside us. I know this is a hard topic, and I don't want to pretend there are no situations where ending a pregnancy is a genuine, thoughtful, legitimate decision. When the baby is known with absolute certainty to be incompatible with life, and even here I want to say be careful because there are a startling number of false positive diagnoses. When the circumstances of the conception were so traumatic that building any real bond simply isn't possible. And continuing the pregnancy would generally put the mother's own life at risk. These situations exist, and this is not a complete list. There are other circumstances I'm not naming here, and I'm not pretending otherwise. Every person has to look at their own situation and decide whether their reason is serious enough to end a life. And I'll say this too, I generally believe that there are souls who planned it this way, who only ever intended to dip a toe in, to feel the edge of it, decide it wasn't for them this time and pull back. But, and this matters, you have to be fully clear about what you're doing, what it means for the child, that it will be traumatic, and what the process actually looks like physically. I'll spare you the details here, but please look into it. Know what you're choosing. And then ask yourself, honestly, is this my personal decision driven by what's most comfortable for me? Or is it generally the best thing for everyone involved? That's a question only you can answer, but it deserves to actually be asked. And when you feel sad about a past decision where you decided against the baby, please forgive yourself and let the baby go. Otherwise, it can happen that the little soul is unable to move on, and both of you deserve peace. And if you can't forgive yourself, I'm happy to assist you, by the way. I'm not telling you all of this to scare you, and I'm definitely not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I believe we can do better, all of us. We can live more consciously. We can feel more deeply. We can show up more fully for ourselves and for the people who are placed in our care. And if you're carrying a child or hoping to, let me offer you this. That child chose you. It feels what you feel. It is already its own person with its own soul and its own story, even before it takes its first breath. That's not a burden. That's one of the most profound invitations life will ever extend to you. And if anything I've said today has landed somewhere inside you, if something stirred, something you've been carrying on for a long time that you've never been able to explain, please reach out to me. Maybe it's something from your own past. Maybe it's a pregnancy, past or present, a trauma you can't quite place, a grief or an emptiness or a guilt that has no obvious name, or just a feeling that there's something there without knowing what. You don't have to carry that alone, and you don't have to understand it before you reach out. Sometimes the first step is enough. I'm here. Thank you for listening.